Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 48 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent of 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. Everyone who I know that advocates for somebody will have an origin story. For me, this is mine. This won't be an easy story for me to tell you or for you to hear. Emotionally, I have no doubt that my wife and I carry the toll of that night to this day. My wife and I call this one particular night Rage Night. And before I dive into anything, there's some things I want to put into context, and there's 8 things. If you want to put yourself in our shoes, just skip ahead of these 8 points and listen to the story, and you can imagine how confused and scared she and I were at the time. So let's put a couple things into context. So number 1, I record things because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to explain or show, events like this to anybody. If I'm talking to a pediatrician, a doctor, I really don't quite understand how to get past the initial concept of, my kid is just angry, or, he throws things. I don't know if this is something in my head, but it more felt like a case of you tend not to be taken seriously if it's like a 4-year-old, getting mad. I have video of pretty much everything. And I've got a ton of written documentation as well. I didn't even realize when I was going back over my files and notes and such, like how much I had written. And I even found an email to our pediatrician outlining the details of that night. And I'm going, oh, I forgot about such and such. If you're concerned about what to do, if you're in a situation like ours, number 1, seek medical advice. Your doctor, pediatrician, psychologist, psychiatrist, school counselor, anyone with a medical background. Talk to them. Number 2, document. Write it out, put it in a video, notes in your iPhone, sit down in Microsoft Word afterwards, write it all out or video it all out. You will thank yourself later. Number 3, educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about what you may be up against. Try and figure out who the bad sources and the good sources are. There's a lot of good Facebook groups that have a lot of great education, but there's also a lot of popular people out there that don't have good information. I'm fortunate I am as detailed as I am. I can piece together years worth of our lives because of it. I'll fully admit that I am traumatized. And I probably should get help for this and talk to somebody. I don't want to make it seem like there's a but to this, but I guess there is a but. Having all these details, again, not realizing I had ADHD at the time and I would forget certain things, the fact that I wrote everything down and became obsessed with so much documentation it helped us to this point, to this day. And that was good. That is a very good thing. But again, I probably should talk to somebody. Okay, that was number one. Number two, I was actually debating mixing in the audio of that evening with the episode, but number one, it's painful for me to listen to. And number two, I'm detailed enough that you don't need to hear the audio of this. Our family was in distress. You don't need to hear Owen screaming. If you're in the same situation as us, then you've probably heard your own child screaming. Number three, in 2017, we had met our speech pathologist, and she was awesome. I wish she hadn't have left BC, but she is the one who said and suggested that Owen may be on the spectrum. And that was our first introduction to autism. We didn't know anything about it. We knew the word, but we probably had the stereotypical mindset that everybody else has about being on the spectrum. If she ever hears this, bless you, Breed, for telling us, because you were right. Number four, Rage Night isn't exactly one night, but it's actually over the course of the month of December of 2018. But the absolute worst night was December 26th of 2018, Boxing Day. That is the Rage Night that I'm referring to. Number five, in 2018, we had started Owen at a new daycare, and things were going fantastic. It was a far cry from the struggles that we had at our previous daycare, who were really good for us. But Owen, we would drop him off in the mornings at the old location and at the old daycare rather, and he just would not want to leave. We couldn't figure out what it was. We thought, separation anxiety or something like that. We didn't understand. I mean, to make matters, I guess worse is that Owen lacked the speech communication and skills to communicate anything specific to us. Somebody could argue, he's screaming and he's mad. Yeah, but that's not saying, I don't like the red M&M. That's not specific. It's not a word that you or I may understand in terms of trying to piece through. Since he was struggling at night, we always asked the daycare, the old one, how he was during the day, hoping for any sort of insight. And we were always told his day was fine. He never caused any fights. He was never a bother, happy kid. And that was confusing because when he came home, it was a struggle. The great thing about the new location is that for a few brief months, it gave my wife and I a chance to breathe for the first time in a very long time. And one more thing on the separation anxiety piece, even looking back years later, we know there was a fear. To Owen, that fear was 100% rational. But to my wife and I, we didn't understand. We couldn't communicate effectively. We didn't know how to understand his needs. Number six, as I mentioned before, that was one night. When my wife and I started looking back on things, we actually pieced together the rest of the month, and there were two other nights that stood out. December 8th and December 17th, where we had some, they weren't fights exactly, but he was acting out more than he normally would have. Again, it wasn't until this was all over with that we realized that everything was connected, or at least we strongly suspected that it was. Number 7, we also started melatonin on December 29th, 2018. Because of the events of the 26th, and actually the 28th, that's what started us taking a chance. Funny enough that even with the melatonin, I don't think it was the fact that we had to up the dose, but it still took him 2 hours to fall asleep. So that gives you a sense of how tight he was holding on. Number 8, you might be thinking, because this is Boxing Day and because it's December, the excitement of Christmas could have played a part. The answer to that is possibly. Right? He was getting far more possessive of objects at the time. He's got a baby sister now, but that wasn't at the root of this. That wasn't, the trigger or anything behind that. Quite honestly, that was a really happy Christmas. And, it's something where maybe the overall pressure contributed to things. but it certainly wasn't the spark. That is without question. For the sake of context, there's your setup. There's the 8 points that put this into context. So here's the short version of the story. December 26th was mostly a normal day. We did some light Boxing Day shopping. Nothing out of the ordinary really happened. And I even have a video of him being happy in the afternoon. That evening, we are not sure, and I don't remember what set him off. However, things started with Owen getting the toilet paper out, which is something that he was doing before, and he would roll out the toilet paper in whatever room he's in, and he would make barriers, and he called the barriers his safe zones. That evening, we were getting ready for bed, and he didn't want to get into our bed at all. He was rolling the toilet paper out in our bedroom floor and on the bed, and I think it might have been roll number 3 at this point. And so he just couldn't sit still. He wouldn't sit still. None of it. Something, I don't know what it was, but things escalated from there. Eventually, we went downstairs to see if we could get him a bottle and to fall asleep, maybe just watching TV, which is a tactic that we were using at the time, and it did work. Things just escalated from there. When it finally happened, the cat tower was thrown down, and it's a tall cat tower. He just began screaming at Siobhan and myself about how we're poo-poo heads. When he got into the kitchen, he began to throw everything he could at us. He threw some chairs, and they're the big dining room chairs. He knocked those down. Thankfully, he didn't land on his foot. Chairs, bags, anything that wasn't loose. He started throwing Tupperware, all the Tupperware around. That had come all out. Thankfully, there was no way for him to reach things like the plates and such. It's far too high for him to reach anyways. All that stuff was thrown all over the kitchen. I realized that he was also headed in the direction of the knife block on the counter, and I quickly moved that up to a place that he couldn't get to. I even at one point began to move all the kitchen chairs downstairs because I wanted to have the kitchen just empty. That way, he couldn't, if he got lucky, we end up getting hit with a chair or something like that. Not that he could have lifted it, but he can sit there and push it, but not fully lift it. The house was an absolute mess. Really, up to this point in life, Owen's hit me before, and not that I'm going to say I'm used to it, but he's done that before. However, this was the first time he actually had hit Siobhan in the face. And I remember the cry that she gave as he did that, and just he couldn't to understand the relationship with Owen and Siobhan. It's almost like Siobhan can do no wrong with him. He can't. I mean, she can, but the esteem that Owen holds her in it's very high. For him to have done that was a pretty major step. He had also tried to get out of the house. We basically had to stand in front of not only our kitchen door, but our front door as well. He had tried to unlock the door, but because he could barely reach the door handle, he couldn't open it. He couldn't really reach the lock very well. So, you've got a lock that's not fully unlocked, and he's trying to open the door to get out. Thankfully, as much as our place opens up to a street, we've got a small little yard with a gate, so he wouldn't have made it very far. This went on for about 2 hours, and I had finally gotten a safe hold on him and held on to him long enough where he had passed out in my arms, crying and sobbing, and this is about 11:30 at night. I just rocked him, saying, "Shh." And I was scared to stop because every noise would get him distracted again, and he'd cry and scream, but I would just go back to shh. as calm as I could. And I held him as gently as I could. So I don't think I got him up to bed until about 11:45 or so. I don't even think I fell asleep until 1. Something like that. I don't even think I did sleep. If you ask me if I remember the next day, truthfully, I do not. I'd have to go find notes to see if it can jog my memory, but I don't remember the 27th at all. Funny enough. I'm pretty sure we cleaned everything up on the 27th, and we went through the day. December 28th, on that morning, he had another blow up. Owen refused to go to daycare because of some boy who had hit him in the stomach. Owen was terrified, and I had zero reason not to believe that our son was telling us the truth. However, he's raging again. For the sake of safety, because Mackenzie was so little, she would have been a year something, and Siobhan left the house with Mackenzie. Siobhan couldn't take it. Eventually, I was able to calm Owen down, and we actually did go to the daycare together. But I said to him, we're only going to go if I can talk to the teachers, and you're going to be there with me. Okay? And I made it our deal, and we went. And after speaking with the staff, nobody knew a thing. One challenge I had, was because it was Christmas, all the regular staff had been on holidays, and they had substitutes in, so I couldn't get any straight answers. But Owen agreed to go, and I don't think that kid was there, and I stayed in the car for about an hour, just in case my phone rang, and I had to go back. I just wanted to be close by, because I had no idea what was going on. And I sat alone in my car. I was angry, I was upset, I was crying, and I was scared. Somewhere around the start of December 2018, there was a boy that apparently had hit Owen at daycare in the stomach, which I'd already mentioned before. Siobhan and I didn't hear anything about this. Owen didn't say anything about this until the evening of December 23rd. Owen had 2 separate and angry evenings on December 8th and 17th, but those paled in comparison to what I just described. He was acting out more than he normally did, and that was unusual, but he'd said nothing to us about this boy. It wasn't until early January 19 that we pieced everything together and we saw the connection. We had no idea that he was holding on to this for the better part of the month, but that he could hold on to it for this long. One thing Siobhan and I typically do is, like any parent, we notice injuries. We didn't see any bruising or anything. The closest we saw was a little mark on his cheek. But that could have been, from taking off a jacket, and maybe he, it scratched himself. That's it. We saw absolutely nothing. Daycare said nothing about seeing any bruising for that matter either. That in itself was a shock. You might have been wondering if we had called 911. The answer was almost. So on the 26th, there was a very odd ebb and flow to everything. And there were loud moments followed by quiet ones, just crying. And we were able to talk to him, but then things would pick up again. And I remember I felt like an idiot at the thought of calling. What am I supposed to say? My 4-year-old is tearing apart my house, and I can't stop him. What's a cop supposed to do? Cuff my child? Is the MCFD going to take my boy away? Now that's even more fear than what's going on. Please understand that at the time we had no clue about ADHD or autism. We were clueless. We were powerless. The smartest thing that we did was give him space and kept talking to him. We let him destroy the house because restraining him would not have helped. That much I know. Objects can be replaced or put back. It's a Tupperware container. It's a piece of plastic. Who cares? If I got a cut or a bruise as a result, I don't care. The only thing that matters is Owen is safe and Kenzie is safe. Tear the damn house apart. Go for it. So it was that night, December 26th at about 11:45 or so. And I know this because it's kind of imprinted in my brain that as I was holding Owen and he had passed out doing the whole shh thing, that's when I said to myself, I never want another family to go through what we did. And as I said this to myself, I'm looking over I've got Owen in my arms. He's asleep. I think he had a bottle with him, I think. And I'm looking over the chaos and mess and everything of the house. And that was it. I was broken. Pretty sure that broke Siobhan. And everything I do now is in prevention of nights like that. It is the reason that we still have, even at 9 years old, because this is now years ago, obviously, it's the reason we have locks on doors. Because of that. Because he was trying to get out. And we didn't know if he would wake up in the middle of the night and walk away. So the locks stay on, and the locks, there's no way he can get them. Probably can at 9 years old now, but we're okay. We're not what we were before because we are educated and we know so much more. That's my origin story. That's the reason. Again, if you're ever in doubt, document as much as you can. If you don't know anything, document as much as you can. Videos, photos, diaries. Just document it. Please. It's hard. You're not documenting the bad things. You're not saying how bad your child is. You're saying, what is going on? I need help. And the more you can present information that's collected to a party that you want help from, the easier it's going to be to understand, because we're emotional. For me, just talking to myself, how do I get past the hysterics of what happened that night and just stick to details? And that's where you want to hone in on the details. Put your energy and grief and trauma through that, and let that be the communication piece to do. If you're thinking you need a break after listening to this, yeah, I do too. It wasn't easy. The story had to be said. I could have just said, you know what, my kid tore apart the house one night and it was really traumatizing and bad. And maybe I might sit there and say that, at some point, just off the cuff. I don't think that's the right way to approach a story like this. Far from it. There is far too much that we go through as parents where we feel dismissed by people that we're seeking help from, and we are left with no direction on what to do, how to help. And you have that ever-present thought of, a government ministry taking your kid away. So, no, understand the impact that this has. And when you gloss over these things, it's not doing you any favors, but people need to understand the impact that this has. Hopefully that conveys a one iota of why I'm passionate as I am. And I love my son. I love my family. They are amazing. My son is the best guy I've ever met, and I'm just so proud of him. The same goes for my daughter. She is the absolute She's so much fun. I also want to say that without my wife, and I know she feels the same way, we wouldn't have become a team. If there's something that we have done over the years, not on purpose, it's just who we both are, we turned us, not just husband and wife, turned us into a team. And she is absolutely the best teammate I've ever had. If you don't have a teammate, that's okay. Find someone that you can bounce something off of, bounce ideas off of, learn from, that is different than you. Not all of us are going to be married. Some of us are going to be solo, whether you're a solo dad or a solo mom. Don't feel shame in that, because you do have a team. Your team will look different than mine, or ours rather, and our team will look different than yours. Then will look different from the next person. There's no right way to do any of this. The right way is when everyone is happy and healthy. You're at that point. I don't want people to walk away from this episode feeling bummed out. And you may very well do that. What I do want you to do, walk away from this episode basically saying, oh my God, look to the examples and things that we did later on so you can feel like you can make the change that you need to make the change to have your family be happy and to look after them. That's ultimately where this is going. I don't want you to feel powerless. You are not. There is hope. There really is. I promise you there is hope. You may have to change. God knows my wife and I did, but there is hope. There is help out there. The people that know and have been through something like this know. They know what it's like. But for someone who has not heard this or heard stories of things like we've gone through, this is going to be jarring to you. By simply giving a gloss over explanation takes away from the emotional impact and impact overall that this has and had on us. The other reason I recorded this is because I want to erase a stigma. As much as my wife and I needed help, the unfortunate truth is that you can't help us. What we needed was someone to take us by the hand and help us solve this and figure this out. And I don't mean this by solving my son. I don't need to solve our son or any child. He's not a problem. If there's any problem, that's on my wife and I because we have to learn how to communicate with him. I think people that listen and try to offer advice, I get it. You mean well, and it's not that I want you to stop. In fact, really what I want you to do is switch gears a bit. Listen and ask that person, what do you think that I can do for you? Clarify what your role is supposed to be. Do they want someone to listen to? Do they want you to make a phone call for them? Do they want to know if there are any resources? We don't need theories. We don't need what, your uncle's aunt said about such and such. We don't want that. Because you, most likely, my dear listener, are not an expert in autism or ADHD. And neither is that parent that is in distress. None of us expect you to be that expert. The best way to be an ally is for you to listen and ask them what you can do for them or how you can help. Because that's what a family like mine really needed, was that kind of intervention. We needed a psychologist, a psychiatrist, an OT, pediatrician, anything that could explain and give us tools. Don't suggest a resource for them if they're struggling. Don't. make them a meal. If you really want to do something nice for them, make them a meal. I can't count the amount of times that my wife and I would have done takeout because we didn't have the capacity to cook. I can't count it. I get that your heart is in the right place, and you are a good person for trying to help. Or if they have another kid, maybe your kid and their kid can play together, and that can take some pressure off of the family just to give them a break. I'm going to stop there. If you're listening to this, you know there's a part 2 coming. There's only one part of the story, but take a walk. Take a walk, go clear your head. If you got your kids around, if your significant other's around, go give them a hug. Tell them how much you love them.
I wanted to add on one more section about the MCFD. The MCFD stands for the Ministry of Children and Families here in BC. You may know it by another name in your province or state. The MCFD has an absolutely horrible stigma, and they haven't done very much to help themselves through the decades get rid of it either. The line they have to balance is protecting a child from abuse and helping the parents. The thoughts of my child will be taken away by a social worker are very real, especially in BC, Canada, and the world, as we continue to see the systemic racism that exists now in many communities. It's still there. The comments that I made in the earlier part of the episode have to do with the fact that those are exactly the fears that were running through my wife and I's head. Just as there is no instruction manual given to you for when your child is born, what makes you think that there's an instruction manual for a child who has autism? There isn't. For resources, I was going to cover this in the next part, but tiny bit of a spoiler alert. We did reach out to the MCFD for help. I had an in-person meeting with O, and there wasn't much that they could do. They could easily see that we had his best interests at heart, that he was safe, he was not hurt, etc. Any programs that they suggested had this wait list of 6 months to a year or longer, so this wasn't helpful for us. I also remember one particular event that a relatively famous book author and psychologist was putting on. And I won't name names. I went up to this gentleman and told him about our situation, and I asked him if he knew if there were any safe holds, ways to avoid this, and his answer was shocking. I felt diminished, I felt less valid, especially when he said, "I'll be damned if I'm going to let a 4-year-old beat me up." That's the last thing you say to someone who's feeling that vulnerable. There are very little resources for parents that teach you how to avoid these situations. Prioritize the relationship, and it's sad. My pediatrician and I were talking the other day about this topic, and she said that I have an emotion-focused approach to parenting. My wife and I are looking into low arousal training. I believe it was created by a UK company, but you can take the classes in Canada. And a description from their website, which I think is lowarousal.com, the low arousal approach emphasizes a range of behavior management strategies that focus on the reduction of stress, fear, and frustration and seeks to prevent aggression and crisis situations. The low arousal approach seeks to understand the role of the situation by identifying triggers and using low-intensity strategies and solutions to avoid punitive consequences for distressed individuals. Another goal of mine in the podcast is to talk about tools that I've come up with that help us. I dug into the process improvement background that I have and came up with some really cool tools. This is for another episode, though. At the very least, I wanted you to walk away with a couple little interesting resources that may help you, your family, or your child.
That's the end of part 1. When we get to part 2, we're going to talk about trying to get ourselves some help as a family and where we went to from here. If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
Don't forget to rate our show and subscribe.
We are the ADHD family.
I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. One of the things that we love about Owen is how literal he is. There was a joke that we used to say to him that he would never understand. He does now, so he catches it. But we would tell him, "Hey Owen, can you hold your horses?" And then he'd go, "I don't have any horses, Dad." Now when we try to tell him this joke, he just catches us and he's like, "That doesn't work on me anymore." See you soon for a new episode. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated.